Well, we left the show, like 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago now. Because basically our family goals that we had for ourselves didn't align with what we found out. That like we ended up finding out like we didn't have as much control over our lives as it related to like the show and stuff.
Yeah, basically like Joel said, we just learned some information just before we had to quit filming because we were kind of put between a rock and a hard place where we had to choose between our family goals or filming, and really felt like it was in our best interest as a family to pursue our family goals.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are having a good day. It's Tuesday, November 30th. I'm ready to go. It's been a very busy day already. I have been doing a lot of stuff on Instagram. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram because I'm doing more up to the minute breaking news on that related to the case, and then coming over here to sort of bring you more of the in-depth coverage. So Josh Duggar's case has started, but it is not actually into the testimony at this point. Right now, jury selection is underway in Arkansas, and Josh and Anna arrived. Now, when Josh and Anna arrived, Anna was seen clutching Josh's hands. This is very different than previous days when she had walked in only holding his hand with one. Today, she looked visibly nervous. Now, yesterday was an interesting day in court because there is kind of some last minute housekeeping items that are going on with the prosecutors and the defense. There is evidence that they want to bring into this trial that relates to things that Josh did back in 2002 and 2003. And yesterday, there were two people that testified in court, one named Bobby Holt and another one named Jim Bob Duggar. Y'all know who Jim Bob Duggar is. So the prosecutors are wanting to admit into evidence Bobby's testimony along with Jim Bob's testimony to be able to confirm what was found in a police report from 2006 about things that Josh Duggar had done. And they believe that this evidence is going to help them paint a pattern of behavior for him to show that he has been doing the same things for decades, and that clearly this has been a escalating pattern of behavior for him. At issue is obviously what we've all known about that came out in 2015 in those reports that were released by In Touch. So yesterday, Bobby Holt spoke to what she learned from Josh Duggar, and then Jim Bob Duggar actually pretended like he couldn't remember anything, and he actually kind of got into a fight with the judge. Well, more like the judge scolded him. Now, today we should be expecting a ruling on this, but they filed a motion to try to sum up for you what was told in court and testified to by Bobby. The current fight right now is over whether or not Bobby Holt's testimony will be able to be admitted into the court. They also still need to determine if what Josh Duggar did in 2002 and 2003 can be a part of the case as well. And if you wait around until the very end, I'll let you know about someone that might surprise you that might be a witness. So in the new motion that was filed in response to the defense's motion that wants to suppress this testimony, basically what Josh Duggar's attorneys are claiming is that Bobby Holt was working in a spiritual capacity for Josh Duggar, and so therefore Josh Duggar's confessions or admissions to her are protected under client privilege, or clergy privilege. And they even suggested at the very end of their filing that their denomination required that everything stay confidential. And so therefore even an exception around CA or SA would not be relevant because it was required to stay confidential. What the government said about her testimony was this. When the government sought to elicit testimony from Ms. Holt regarding the defendant's admissions at the hearing, he objected based on the clergy penitent privilege and cited multiple cases in support of this new claim. So apparently he brought this up at the very last minute, and they got an email like right before she was about to be testifying. So they said they got an email saying, oh, no, like she can't testify, this is privileged. And now this is their argument saying it wasn't privileged. The court did allow her to testify, and now the judge is going to rule on whether or not he's going to allow it. They said without being provided any authority beforehand, the court preliminarily overruled the objection and permitted Mrs. Holt to testify. Mrs. Holt then explained that on March 30th, 2003, the Holts joined the defendant and his parents in his parents' bedroom, where the defendant told Mrs. Holt that he had inappropriately areas of Jane Doe 4 and had been doing this on Jane Doe's 1 and 3 over the clothes for years. He said that Mrs. Holt explained that he was telling her this because he was courting her daughter and that the relationship would have to end as a result of his conduct. Mrs. Holt also described this discussion as a conversation between close family friends regarding the defendant's relationship with her daughter. And while she recalled saying prayers during the conversation, a normal occurrence, she explained, Mrs. Holt emphasized that the conversation was not related to anyone's role in the church that the Duggars and the Holts attended. Mrs. Holt testified that in 2005, the defendant stayed with her and her husband in Little Rock because, as she explained, they loved him and wanted to see if he could repair his relationship with their daughter. One evening, after her husband fell asleep, Mrs. Holt testified the defendant told her that he had done something to Jane Doe 4 and while she sat on his lap, and while he read Bible stories to her, and that this occurred on March 30th, 2003, and that this R occurred on March 30th, 2003. And this is what prompted the Duggars to contact the Holts that day. The defendant raised the same objection to this testimony, and the court instructed the parties to submit briefings on the clergy pertinent privilege. So the footnote here takes a little bit of a dig here at Jim Bob. So I want to say this. The defendant's father also testified at the hearing. While he provided garbled answers about the leadership of his church and repeatedly claimed not to recall whether the defendant admitted to doing these things to Jane Doe's 1 through 4, despite recalling other very specific details from this time frame, he confirmed that the Holts were his best friends and that the defendant admitted to doing things to Jane Doe's 1 and 4 through 4, and that he reached out to the Holts as his close friends in approximately 2002 or 2003 to discuss the issue. He did not testify about the defendant's 2005 admissions. In other words, while he was ultimately provided some corroborative information, his testimony was less credible and far less detailed as Mrs. Holt's. So Jim Bob was basically not answering questions. He was skirting around things, saying he couldn't remember things. They literally brought out the police report, and I posted this on my Instagram because I don't want to bring this onto my YouTube channel, but basically the police report is a detailed account from Jim Bob Duggar that he gave to Springdale in 2006, which outlines that Josh had been doing things to 4 girls for years, and that it was more than just once or twice, that this was extremely, and it was more than how he described it on Megyn Kelly. And when he read that, he said it didn't jog his memory. So he was reading his own testimony that he had given to Springdale's PD, and he said he couldn't remember it. But then he could also remember details about the same time frame where he invites them over to the house. She refuted that women actually served as leaders in the church and that she was just a longtime friend of the defendant and a mother of the girl who was dating when Josh did these things to his sisters. And that while their lives are shaped by religion, the defendant's conversations with Mrs. Holt about these events as they related to his relationship with her daughter are no more privileged than a defendant's discussions about his case with his lawyer's well-informed non-attorney wife, as an example. So their argument is that she just wasn't a attorney, or she wasn't a clergy. She didn't hold a position. The church didn't allow that. Elders were only men, and that she just doesn't have that privilege. They also claimed at the very end here that even if they were to say that it was privileged, that they waived it because they've talked about it publicly on their website. Jim Bob talked about it on Megyn Kelly's interview. And they could have clarified and confirmed her accounts by calling Jim Holt. And he could have testified that, yes, she wasn't an elder. And or they could have called Josh to the stand, and they did neither. So their argument was basically that we should be able to allow this because it wasn't privileged. And they are claiming that Josh was only confiding her under the belief that she was clergy. Got it? So this testimony seems to be something because of, this is like pivotal, because this is the first time that they are actually classifying what Josh did to one of the Jane Does as R. Okay? And because of that, that would be a pattern of behavior, and they're not disputing, neither side was disputing after yesterday's hearing that this stuff actually happened. In dispute was whether or not her testimony could be added. And he argued that, Gelfand argued that this was old, that it would happen when he was a minor. Jim Bob was arguing about how it was sealed and it was a tabloid. It didn't matter if it had the tabloid watermark on it. They were reading his actual testimony. The only things that were like blurred out of it were the names of his children. Otherwise, it had a detailed account from James Robert Duggar himself about what happened on the days that Josh came to him and told him what happened. So we still don't know where that's going to land. It seems highly suspect that the judge in this case would not allow this as evidence, because I believe that it will show, his pattern of behavior. And the judge seemed to really be needing a little bit more time because they were sort of like the prosecutors blindsided by this privilege. My other takeaway here is that Jim Bob Duggar was called garbled and not credible. Jim Bob was able to corroborate what she said. He didn't dispute certain things. He just wouldn't go into detail, and he wouldn't discuss the severity of it. But what if none of that even mattered, and what if one of the girls testified? What if the judge allows this and one of the girls that this happened to actually got on the stand and actually said, this happened to me? Because that is what could be happening here. Because I got off the phone with someone who is literally down in Arkansas right now at the courthouse, and they let me know that Jill Duggar has been added onto the witness list. This is a new addition by the prosecutors, and she would be testifying against her brother. My guess is that under the assumption that they might potentially throw out Bobye Holt's account, they will need someone besides Jim Bob who can provide credible testimony as to what happened. And who else is going to be honest and provide credible testimony other than Jill Duggar? Jill Duggar has been by far the only Duggar willing to go outside of her father's control and literally call herself a victim. She has been able to publicly state that she has a very estranged relationship with her family. She has triggers that are at her home. She had to fight with her father to get paid for the show. She did not want to be on Counting On after everything that had come out. She wanted to just not be on the show anymore. And yet she was sort of forced into a position of being on the show based on a contract that she had signed at her wedding. So Jill has an estranged relationship with her parents, and she is very distant from her siblings. And she has publicly said that. She still sees them from time to time, but whether or not she's actually close to them like she used to be, no. Now, the biggest, point of reference here is something related to a Jane Doe 4. And my belief is that Jane Doe 4 was a person, and they called for someone else after Josh had done this to them, and that Jane Doe 4 might have called for Jill. So not only would Jill be testifying for herself as Jane Doe 1, I'm assuming, she would also could potentially be a witness to the aftermath of what happened to Jane Doe 4. And there's been this long thing about Jill telling her parents about what she saw, being the one to sort of blow the whistle on Josh. There was also a revelation that Jane Doe 1 actually, or one of the girls punched Josh in the face when he attempted to do something similar to her. And if I recall, my sources said that it was Jill that actually punched him in the face. So Jill could not only probably attest to her own testimony of what happened to her, but she might be able to speak as a witness to what happened to Jane Doe 4. And if that's the case, in the event that Bobby Holt gets maybe thrown out based on this clergy privilege, they have the backup of Jill. But who better to testify about what happened than someone that it happened to? And it is so brave of her to do this, because I'm assuming that the prosecutors in this case did not want to have to call the girls. I'm assuming they did not want to have to put the girls in a position where they would have to become a part of this case. I'm sure they wanted to protect them. But it seems like Josh and his dad are going to move hell and high water to try to silence anyone that knows the truth. And so in the case of Bobby, they're trying to silence her through the clergy privilege. In the event that that works, well, Jill can come in. Jill will tell the truth. Jill's brave. Jill knows the truth. Jill is the only one in this family that has, in my opinion, been truthful about what happened. And Jill can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Because my biggest takeaway from Jim Bob Duggar's testimony yesterday is that if you are one of the girls and your dad literally sat up on a witness stand and said he could not remember what happened to you, seriously, something that is that serious that happened to a child that you have had to go through therapy through, that has followed you through your whole life, that was the worst time of your life, and your dad can't remember it, you know he can remember it. But it has to feel like a betrayal. And I'm kind of hoping that that serves as a catalyst to at least those others that haven't woken up yet. The ones that are still sort of on the fence, Joy, Jessa, that have been straddling with the family on whether they stay, whether they go. They know that if they go, they're cut off. They know if they go, they lose out on all of their other siblings. They know because they've seen what's happened to Jill. But if they leave, they also have the truth. And another thing that we need to talk about is the boys. None of the boys have actually spoken out against the Duggars. And they're financially dependent on their dad. And if you had the choice as a boy to speak out against your father and speak out against your brother, and do the right thing, or continue to live your life, have access to planes and boats and helicopters so that you can have your lavish life of flying and going places and pretending to be a chopper medic or whatever it is that you're doing, do you give that up to tell the truth? Do you give that up to stick up for your sisters, or do you stay silent because you don't want to lose those toys and that wealth and that paycheck? Adults being dependent on their parents is not normal, and they shouldn't have to be dependent on their parents. And if you truly cared about your sisters, I would think you'd stand up for them and, speak out for them. And the silence of the boys right now is so palpable to me, and it's so unnerving to me. And it just feels like part of them just cares more about their own selves and making sure that they're paid and they get their money from their dad so they can have the things that they want. They're all pilots. They all want access to those planes. They all want that life. If you speaking the truth meant you don't have a plane anymore, are you going to tell the truth? Sometimes I wonder if those are sort of the things that he holds over their heads. Well, if you tell the truth, you don't get planes. If you tell the truth, you're going to lose your job. If you tell the truth, you know what I mean? You just don't know what Jim Bob's telling these kids. And that's a horrible place to hold your kids. But at the same time, every adult has a choice. And if you don't and you stay silent and you just allow things to happen, you become complicit. And that's my opinion. So I'm proud of Jill, and I hope that she doesn't have to be called, but it's good to know that if needed, she will testify against her brother. And that could potentially squash the issue with Bobby if it gets thrown out. With that being said, what are your thoughts about the potential aspect of everything being like with Bobby's testimony? What are your thoughts about her testimony? What are your thoughts about Jim Bob having amnesia? Literally having amnesia. Having amnesia about what happened. And do you think the clergy privilege can actually hold up here? Or do you think that it's just a last-ditch effort to silence Bobby? And if Jill testifies, do you think that they'll try to sequester or they'll try to squash her testimony too? You cannot silence Jill. You can't. But what a crappy position for Jill to be put in by her father, because it starts and ends with them and Jim and Josh for not taking this plea. He could have taken a plea and the sisters never would have had to be in this position. And here we are, November 30th, and Jed Duggar is on the witness list. And Jed Duggar, but Jed Duggar is not going to be testifying. I mean, even if he testifies for the prosecution on regards to the car lot, don't expect him to go against the family. He is so in Jim Bob's pocket. He will maybe cooperate, but don't expect him to be giving any damning testimony. So our best wishes to Jill. You've got this, Jill. We are behind you here. We support you. Tell the truth. Be brave. If they need you, do what's right. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for your sisters. Be the only voice in that family that has the truth. And you know what? The truth will set you free. It might set your siblings free. And this might serve as a wake-up call to everyone else in that family that is sitting there on the sidelines, enabling the bad behavior of Jim Bob and Josh Duggar. Because this whole house of cards can collapse once the truth is revealed. So tell your truth. Bye, guys.